a minute or two to catch up. But welcome to all of you for joining us and joining us for Offshore Drilling in the Gulf, a firsthand account. I'm Christian Wagley. I'm the coastal organizer in Florida and Alabama for Healthy Gulf. We are a nonprofit organization dedicated to the Gulf of Mexico and the waterways and the communities along its shores. We're based in New Orleans, but we work in all 5 Gulf of Mexico states, and I'm based in Pensacola and work, again, along the coast of Alabama and mostly the Panhandle coast and occasionally into South Florida as well. So we're really excited that you can join us. You know, it's a strange time, certainly, and we've had to kind of pivot our work, you know, to the online world and doing Zoom meetings, and it can sometimes be a little bit cumbersome, but we're really glad that you all are joining us, because you know what, the polluting industries and the other industries and people are continuing to work on their issues. So we've got to continue to be the watchdog that we are and continue to work on these things and not put them aside, because it's too important. So we have to continue to find ways to engage, and tonight is certainly part of that. You know, the drilling issue in the Gulf is certainly as hot as it's ever been right now. And we have an opportunity tonight to hear about someone who's actually been there firsthand and to hear more about that. So, but before we do that, before we hear from Scott, I do want to introduce one of our special friends that Healthy Gulf works with quite a bit and that helped us get the word out about this event here in Northwest Florida. And that's the group 350 Pensacola. And we have Marley Wells from 350 here tonight. And we just thought we'd give her a chance to just say a couple of words about the organization and the work that they do.
Mute.
And we are unmuting.
You want to unmute Marley?
About the logistics of all that. Well, I just want to say, thank you so much to everybody for being here. So 350 Pensacola was formed in 2010 in the wake of the BP oil disaster. And in the last 10 years, we've been doing a lot of advocacy and education work to further the cause of climate action in Northwest Florida, which is very important, obviously. Currently, the priority that we're working on is getting the city of Pensacola to set a goal for 100% renewable energy. And I just appreciate everybody for being here and supporting. And I just want to encourage everyone to check us out on Facebook at 350 Pensacola, because we post a lot of educational and news stuff there. So thanks again.
Awesome, Marley. Thanks again for all the work that you all do, and thanks for helping us get the word out about this event. So just one announcement about the logistics of the event. We will have time to take questions at the end for Scott. And we ask you to put those in the chat. So at any time throughout the event, you can go ahead and put those in the chat, and I'll be monitoring those, and then we'll get those to Scott and give him plenty of time to answer those at the end. So, you know, I did want to say that the work that Healthy Gulf does, and I've been with the organization for coming up on 3 years now, and I can tell you as a resident of Florida, when I first joined Healthy Gulf, how impressed I was that we actually do oversight work, that we actually go out and look at the rigs and look at the offshore industry and provide that third-party accountability. And there's really nobody else doing it. And I know that I feel, as a Floridian, I feel a little bit safer that there's someone out there watching over what is an industry that tends to be, you know, dirty and dangerous on even the best of days. And so for Healthy Gulf, the person who's doing that work for us is my colleague, Scott Eustis. So let me give a full and proper introduction to Scott. Yeah, Scott's a native of New Orleans, born and raised there. Yep. And he actually, interestingly, he's got degrees, undergraduate degrees, both in ecology and English from the University of Georgia, and then later obtained his master's in science, environmental science rather, from the University of New Orleans. While studying ecology, he learned about the value of the Mississippi River Delta and decided that he wanted to spend his time educating people on the ways our lives impact the natural world. By using citizen science in his work with Healthy Gulf, Scott's been able to study wetland health in the wake of the BP oil disaster and enable environmental advocates to ensure private companies are following the laws of the Clean Water Act. He believes that citizens should be empowered to document environmental impacts for themselves so that they can disseminate critical information without it first passing through the filters of government and private enterprise. So with that, welcome, Scott.
Hey, thanks so much, Christian. Yeah, tonight we'll share, hopefully not too many war stories, some slides about some of the things we see as a Gulf-wide environmental organization You know, we're kind of pressed into this. We're not specifically funded to do this. It's only just members giving us independent funding that allow some of this oversight work. A lot of which we've done since the BP disaster. So we're gonna show some things from there. So it's members like yourselves that just contributing to the general fund that enable us to get out. Yeah, like Christian said, New Orleans born and raised, and my grandfather was a petroleum geologist, so he came from oil. We, know it's always had its benefits, but I think he always taught me to look at what his industry was getting away with. We know that we have to have an independent voice that can check the industry and what they're saying. And this is part of why we don't want the industry expanding into Florida, because often Florida is the independent voice when you consider the 5 Gulf states. Most of our independent science and fact checking comes from Floridians. So thanks for that. Beyond just maintaining the natural resources of the Gulf as it does. A lot of these photos come from overflights with the South Wings organization, southwings.org, so shout out to them. It's a group of volunteer pilots throughout the South. They cover mountaintop removal in North Carolina, and they work a lot out of New Orleans with us specifically, covering a lot of these issues. And we not only watchdog, but here's a trip with the Houston band, the Stuffers, when we went out just to educate them about the wetland coast of the USA, which includes Texas. Here's a little bit of a view from NASA, just to show our ocean, the Gulf of Mexico. There's only 2 oceans in the world that have such a gentle tide. We only have 1 tide a day in the Gulf, from Brownsville to Key West. So it's a very gentle ocean, which means we have very low sloping land from Texas to Florida. That means this is the wetland coast. So it's an area, wetlands are some of the most productive ecosystems. So it's, when we don't have this industry on top of us, it's really some of the most fertile landscape in the entire country, although we have our issues. And tonight we're gonna talk about the offshore. Here's another bit from NASA, just the light, just to show Houston, New Orleans, Mobile, Pensacola, and you have Tampa over on the right side, but also all this constellation of lights out in the ocean showing offshore rigs and platforms and ships. And my buddy sent this to me from July 2008, trying to figure out what this particular light signature was. There's tens of thousands of active platforms and tens of thousands of people that work offshore at any time. So I think most of the country doesn't realize this, that there's a whole industrial ocean in the United States. In fact, we were the first to develop offshore drilling in Louisiana, and we're still the Gulf of Mexico has the second most rigs of any other offshore drilling location, second only to the North Sea. So it remains, the Western Gulf remains an important for wells that have already been drilled, resources that are already being extracted. I think at Healthy Gulf, we want to stop any new production, any new leasing. We want to, because a lease given in 2020 is really not going to be drilled into 2040. And by that time, the climate question is going to override any benefits from this production. Just a little bit close up. So when you have when you have an industrial ocean, you have just chronic oil spills. This is a map just showing, you know, there's going to be accidents. There's even permits. This map also could be a map of the permitted water pollution out in the central and western Gulf associated with oil and gas platforms. But this is just the accidents. So we know we have a lot of problems, you know, once you get west of Pensacola, and you really see not so much on the Florida coast, and we want to keep it that way. You can see the Tampa Superport. Maybe you can see some of the shipping that has to come around Key West. But, you know, this Florida's Nature Coast and the offshore shelf, which is kind of around that break where the light blue goes to dark blue, is some of the last bit of the northern Gulf of Mexico that is pristine. And so we fight to keep it that way with things like the offshore drilling ban. We also are challenging leases. Here's a map of kind of I know you can't see Mobile and Pensacola, but here's the block area of Pensacola is just south of Pensacola. And as you go south, you can see that BP and a lot of the other super majors are still leasing, you know, which means they're planning on producing oil offshore in 2040, farther and farther out in the Gulf. So we are legally challenging these things based on the fact that they haven't done sufficient environmental review. We're very concerned that this company, the one with the most damages to the ecosystem, has the most single bid leases the furthest out, in the deepest water. And in this map as well, you can also see how BP's production is where a lot of our Audubon shearwater feed and live. So we need the government to take into account the environmental impacts of this drilling to species like Audubon shearwater, which relies on Florida to survive. But we're there trying to maintain that boundary with the animals and just politically. When we go out in the Gulf, you know, if we're birding, you know, we don't have a clear horizon. There's always going to be, for example, this is a mobile drilling unit. This is a third of the way to Mexico out of Venice, Louisiana, and we still have that horizon, that industrial horizon. And a lot of people use these structures to navigate. I think when we go out birding in the offshore, you know, a lot of people would say, you know, how it's so familiar to use these structures to navigate. But actually, those of you who are offshore birders might know, you follow the frigate birds. And I've had, because these animals are so dark and so big, you know, you can find them on the horizon and find all the other birds as well as the fish beneath them. So I guess someone coming out of Louisiana, we do use the structures to navigate. It makes the ocean seem more home, you know, like a humanized or familiar to humans. But we know that there's also like natural ways to find our way around the ocean. This is some Brutus whales. This is not my image. I think we'd prefer to see more of this off of Louisiana. The Gulf Brutus whale. We have a subspecies that, since the Deepwater Horizon, we now know it only exists in the Gulf. And particularly, it's mostly been seen south of Pensacola, right on that border of where we're fighting for the moratorium. So this is a species, there are less than 40 individuals left in this little subpopulation in the northern Gulf of Mexico. And unfortunately, when I go offshore off Louisiana, I don't see these guys. I see this. You know, this is out of Fouchon. This is the Maersk Explorer production platform. And most of these drilling units have been idle for since fracking happened. So, you know, the industry is itching. They're looking for someplace new to break into. They've had these very expensive pieces of equipment kind of sitting for 6 or 7 years, and they're ready to go to Florida, to go to New York. um, they're just sitting there in what's called warm stack, where the companies have to spend a lot of money, keeping a crew on the ship, keeping it going so that everything doesn't rust. And so there's this continual push by the industry to open up new areas just so that this piece of equipment doesn't fall into disrepair. So part of what we do at Healthy Gulf is advocate around the Endangered Species Act. And we recently have been successful, along with national groups, pushing the federal government to designate critical habitat for this Gulf Brutus whale. And these are one of the maps from Duke that shows where we think this animal, where we think we can find this animal. It's based on historic observations, but also theories about how the noise of the Central and Western Gulf and the pollution affect the ability of the Brutus whale to feed. So you can see in the map the big deep red. That's where these animals still are existing, and you can see the westernmost part of that big red area is south of Pensacola, and there's so much better habitat in Florida. So again, and you can see that habitat diminishing as it goes to the west. There are a lot of the same temperatures, water currents that would bring krill. You know, there's a lot of similar habitat features that probably once were more prominent in the Western Gulf, but with, you know, as industry moves eastward, this animal's habitat diminishes. And because it is endangered, Healthy Gulf is really pushing the federal government to stop drilling off of Florida. We need it as a refuge. So here's where some of the personal photos happen. And one of the lessons we learned is that if something bad happens, industry's first response is denial. This is 5 days after the Macondo explosion on April 20th. You know, in the news, the story was still all about the 11 men who lost their lives. 11 men who are from the rural Gulf Coast, right? Rural Texas, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. There wasn't an environmental story. There was talk about, you know, there's a little bit of oil out there, but the Coast Guard assured us all they had it in hand. Well, we were out flying over the Gulf with musicians, and it just so happened we had this flight scheduled before the disaster, and we were lucky and glad to be there to see the no response happening. Right, Tad Cochran got on the TV and said there were 40 boats out there on the site, and there were not, but we were lucky to be able to fact check the government in real time in order to push the industry and the government to do more, because they always seem to be behind when it comes to looking at environmental impact and environmental response. Here's a slide. It's a little busy. It's from Ian McDonald from Florida State, who's been a great advocate for the Gulf. Again, I don't think it's a coincidence that he, you know, is ensconced in a university in Florida instead of Louisiana or Texas. Just showing the dots on the left show you how fast the academics came up with the flow rate and how many different voices had to repeatedly criticize BP and the government's estimate, which is this blue line. But over time, through repeated advocacy, we finally got that the government's, you know, we needed independent voices to push the government to get to a true estimate of that flow rate. And here we are 2 months later at Macondo, right? What you're seeing is a lot more boats. Maybe we have those 40 boats that Tad Cochran said we had in April. But you also see a lot of skimmers, I don't know, they look like ants on a picnic cloth trying to pick up all this oil off of the surface. And that's one of the reasons we don't want to expand drilling into Florida, is that the response technologies have not kept up with the ability of the companies to go deeper. I mean, it really, when you see a photograph like this, it really puts, you know, we're glad that there's so many boats out there skimming, but the amount of recovery that happens when you have one of these big oil slicks is so minimal that it's a shame. Most of the oil will dissipate naturally into the environment. It's not skimmed or dispersed. Most of it just is eaten or is degraded. But at least there were more boats after we complained in April. Some of the stuff in Louisiana, you know, this black is the oil coming ashore in Plaquemines Parish. This is Redfish Bay. And once the oil comes ashore in marshes, like on Florida's Nature Coast, like in Redfish Bay, Louisiana, it's just kind of there. You know, this site still has this oil. It's feet down now, as there's been a natural process of sedimentation. But, you know, and is 13 square kilometers of Louisiana were eliminated by the oil, and certainly an uncountable amount of birds and wildlife. This is, and the mammals, again, this was just in 20 minutes walking on Fouchon Beach. We had fresh dolphins washing ashore, even into, this is summer 2011. So, you know, I was glad I was there to report it. We don't have the capacity in Louisiana to deal with some of these unusual we still don't have the capacity to deal with some of the dolphin deaths that happen regularly due to the industry. So this was, when I came upon this creature, you know, the waves made it look like it could still be alive, you know, and it was very haunting to me to be on the beach, to see all of this. But then when we're out with the landowner, you know, we came across so many carcasses of animals that just, you know, because we don't have the capacity in our government to survey them, they had just been left on the shore. And we're still, in Louisiana, we're still experiencing mortality from this event in our dolphin populations. These are long-lived animals. They're carrying with them a tremendous pollution burden, tremendous stress, and their reproductive success rate is extremely low. And again, we only have something to compare it to, and we know how damaged we are in the Western Gulf because we have the science coming out of Florida to compare it to. You know, the industry could dismiss low birth weights as a natural phenomenon if we didn't have studies coming out of Sarasota and Tampa Bay. You know, oil and gas, it doesn't just get in the water, it gets in your politics. This is hopefully not too many slides to the Taylor Energy Slick. This is a spill that has been going, it's still going. It started in 2004 with an undersea mudslide in Ivan. 4 years later, MMS, the precursor to BOEM, an organization so corrupt, it was later dismantled by the Obama administration. But even MMS complained to Taylor, it's like, hey, you really need to do something about this. 4 years after it started. Taylor didn't do anything until groups like Healthy Gulf, Bucket Brigade, Louisiana Environmental Action, and Sky Truth, and South Wings began complaining and litigating. This is 2011 when we really started first looking at it. That's 5 years after it started. And Taylor was still trying to see what it could do. There's the Ocean Saratoga trying to rework the well. But they gave up after a little while. And so by 2013 into 2016. This is years later. We find that exact same spot in the ocean. We still see the same leak. At this point, you don't see a boat. Taylor gave up on trying to fix it, and they were trying to litigate their way. They're still trying to claim it was an act of God, and they're not liable. And they're also, at this point, they're not spending money trying to clean it up. They're spending money on lobbyists in DC, trying to get out of their liability. And that's still where we are today. You can see me getting bigger in these photos. But after years and years, we finally got it in the press enough. And some folks from Florida State, again, a journalist from Florida, Daryl Fears, who wrote for the Washington Post, got it in the press, and we finally got the Coast Guard to step up and hire someone, Kuvion Group, which is mostly former Taylor Energy workers. Some of these engineers fixing this leak now, they used to work for the oil company. They helped build this rig, and now they're helping clean it up. So so they now have, if you remember BP, the top hat, they now have the top hat. It didn't work for BP. It's working for Taylor because this is much shallower water. There's still oil spilling, but it's 95% less than what has been. But we're still in court defending the Coast Guard's actions, because Taylor is suing Kuvion for trespass and suing the Coast Guard for various things, trying to get their money back. We're still pushing to have Taylor spend the money to drill the relief wells for this well. So there's still a little bit. It's no longer a big rainbow sheen that's 13 miles long. It's a much smaller 3-mile sheen, but it's still, the carbon is still coming out, right? This is about a mid-sized landfill's worth of carbon, of methane, excuse me, escaping into the atmosphere every day. So we still need to push the Coast Guard to hire Kuvion or anybody, whoever can do it, to plug those wells or drill relief wells, so this perpetual leak doesn't leak carbon and oil into the atmosphere and water. Right, Kuvion is selling the oil, right, that they capture from the thing, from the well, but Taylor is still arguing over the flow rate. Even as, here's a receipt. Kuvion is driving from Venice, Louisiana to Berwick in Acadia, driving west to the other part of Louisiana and selling the oil to a third party. And yet Taylor is still denying that the flow rate is what it is, which is about 1,000 gallons a day, because that determines their financial liability. So this company can do this because they are a huge philanthropic force, not only in Louisiana, but across 22 states. So the money that comes with drilling will get into your politics. It messes with your political system, and it means the environment is screwed up, but it also means politicians won't take action to fix it. And so we work with a lot of folks in New Orleans, because so much of the art scene is funded by oil and gas. Artists who want to proceed ethically. We don't judge. That's who funds things. But we work a lot with artists trying to figure out where the money comes from, and if they can create communication and create pieces to push back. So Hellas is a big arts foundation in New Orleans. So we work a lot trying to communicate their impact to oysters. So we heard a lot about, we went with BP, but there's also, BP and the super majors, they have their own problems. I would kind of characterize it like, you never buy the new iPhone, right? You wait a year. And so they fix all the bugs, right? They're going super deep. They're kind of like space missions, and they mess up less, but when they mess up, it's incredibly bad. But then after these wells have been developed, the oil company a shell will sell to a stone, and a stone oil will sell to a black elk. And long before the oil runs out, the high amount of profits run out. So what happens is you get these fourth and fifth level companies really inherit really old, rotten infrastructure, and they don't invest the capital to fix it. And you just end up with platforms that are rusted and rotten and chronically break down. So two of those companies are Texas Petroleum Investment Corporation and Hillcore. So just some slides on that. So these are platforms and drillers with just chronic spill problems. In 2011, we flew over Breton Sound, this Texas Petroleum platform. It had a leak. The valve was not working. It just leaked into the ocean for a couple of days. And we've been to this platform many times. In 2015, it caught on fire because they did not have the proper firewall installed. It had just come down in a hurricane and they never replaced it. So again, and then the person in the response vessel told me that when he went to go close that valve, it was still rusted open. So he couldn't stop the leak. So these kinds of, you start out with a company like Shell that has a lot of money in case something goes wrong. But then you end up with these companies that don't have the cash to fix stuff when things go wrong. And what we're seeing now is eventually you have orphan wells where this company will go bankrupt and they just leave it to the government to try to fix this chronically bad situation. This is Hillcore in the Louisiana marshes. They don't apply for permits, so they end up running their boats over old pipelines. And I think there's like at least 2 or 3 spills a month from this company that's still drilling in the Louisiana marshes. Because they don't invest in surveys or the technology, they end up trying to get by on rusted pipes, and inevitably it leads to some of these same things you saw in the BP slides. But even after all the science we had from Deepwater Horizon, and even with a company like Shell, who might be the safest company, this is Shell's glider pipeline leak that happened in 2016 in May. And we were the only independent observers of this event. But it reminded us exactly, 6 years after the Deepwater Horizon, we were in the same place in regards to oil recovery technology, right? We never got those big skimmer boats that people were all talking about during the disaster. The industry's response vessels, all 5 of them were working this leak, but it was almost 100,000 gallons or barrels, I forget which, but it's just oil across the horizon down in Green Canyon, in a place where even it's so far out, even the government struggles to fly over it. So it's the response technology has not kept up with the industry's ability to go deeper and farther, and so that's why we don't want any more these deep leases. Some quick things, because I might be running into time. It's if you get the offshore industry coming in, that's called the upstream. You get pipelines then, which is called the midstream, and then you get the refineries, which is called downstream in industrial lingo. All of this happens in wetlands, right? Because our coast from Brownsville to Key West is the wetland coast. And so it means all of those wetlands that are host to our fisheries and recreational economy become sites of destruction for midstream pipelines and the downstream refineries. So in the fracking era after 2013, just these big oil transmission pipelines are the largest impact to Louisiana wetlands. They take thousands of acres of wetlands a year. We've only recently seen it begin to slow. Here is the Blind River swamps that have just been carved up. And actually this company illegally built, this was an Oklahoma pipeline company that illegally built a road because they really didn't know how to do construction in the swamp. So they ended up with over 300 violations of the Clean Water Act while they were building this pipeline. And then we end up having to enforce the Clean Water Act. Here is an enterprise pipeline in the Atchafalaya Basin. Some of the same things, where in order to build the pipeline, they had to build a road through the swamp, which is against the Clean Water Act, and it blocked many streams and bayous. So we filed a notice with the Atchafalaya Basin Keeper, and we were able to get a bunch of these streams restored. But you know, this is the kind of pressure. It shouldn't be on the citizens groups, but it is. This is what happens when drilling and midstream production comes to your coast. And finally, you know, the United States energy coast is the Gulf, but it's also the wetland coast. So it means that refineries are placed in very low-lying situations. This is a picture during Harvey. You know, Hurricane Harvey hit Port Aransas in Texas. So the Exxon Beaumont refinery, which this is a picture of, you know, up in Beaumont by the Louisiana border, they didn't think they'd have to shut down because the hurricane, you know, hit the other side of Texas. But in fact, Harvey dropped so much rain that the Neches River came up and ran right through the refinery. So we were there, able to document that. This is the river coming up into the floodplain and flooding the refinery. And so we see this kind of chemical disaster from hurricanes happen way too often. So Stolthaven in Louisiana, you know, even if no new refineries are built off of Florida, because that's a bit of a bear in a permitting way, you're going to have storage facilities and you know, small you know, way station kinds of facilities. In 2012, in a Category 1 hurricane in Plaquemines Parish, the surge just came into this facility and pushed millions of barrels of oil storage, pushed the tanks off their base, spreading oil for 3 miles in the middle of the night. So we had thousands of people who had to evacuate through this chemical disaster after Hurricane Isaac. And I think, you know, it, so, and the future is climate change and sea level rise. The oily politics of our states, Texas and Louisiana, make it really hard to talk about the fact that sea level rise is going to be the leading cause of our marsh loss going forward. You know, people in the government who are biologists continually try to bring it up, and our legislature continually shuts it down. So it's the kind of challenge. Once oil gets into your politics, it's just really impossible to have this kind of discussions that that we need to happen in order to sustain what's left. So this is a watchdog project that Healthy Gulf is doing. You can participate in at Cartoscope/land loss. So look out for more from us for that in the future. So that's a little bit of some slides of oil impacts to our coast here in the Gulf Coast. And I think I'll hand it off to Christian for some updates on where we are in the national discussion or the discussion about offshore drilling in Florida.
Thank you for that, Scott. It's a mess out there. My goodness.
Yeah.
It's really a mess. And, you know, most of us will clearly never be able to go out there. So we appreciate your ability to share this with us. I do encourage folks, we've got one question that came in, but to continue to post questions to the chat, and we'll get to those in a moment. But I am going to just update us quickly on where things stand with the Eastern Gulf moratorium. So if you can go to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
So in January of 2018, the Trump administration unveiled an offshore leasing plan that basically opened up, I think it was 47 out of 48 areas of the entire U.S. coast on the Atlantic, the Gulf, the Pacific, into Alaska. And that included the Eastern Gulf of Mexico. And the plan would be that would begin after the current moratorium ends in June of 2022. And this is still the plan that's on the table, despite the fact that there's been some political shenanigans around it, the fact that the administration's had some missteps that, including a lawsuit that kind of set them back. They kind of have the plan on hold in the sense that they're not really actively pushing it forward, but it is officially still the plan on the table. And there's been some very good reporting in just the last month and a half or so that internally the administration plan is to, after the November election, to go ahead and push forward that Eastern Gulf drilling plan again, and take that up once again as part of this energy dominance kind of plan for America. If you want to go to the next slide, thank you, Scott. The real big place that we're looking to right now is Congress. Congress has the ability to head off the president's ability to lease these offshore lands. And that's the way we've protected the Gulf of Mexico in the past for many, many years going back. Former Florida Senator Bill Nelson was really the champion to get put in place the moratorium that protects us right now, which was put in back in, I believe it was 2006. And again, it goes through 2022. So our real champion so far in recent times has been the U.S. House of Representatives, which last September passed not only a temporary extension of the moratorium in the Eastern Gulf, which is what we've had in recent decades, but a permanent moratorium on any more drilling in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico. Unfortunately, that issue has not been taken up in the United States Senate, despite multiple attempts to do so, to attach that to other pieces of legislation. Senator Rubio of Florida, I know, has made some attempts along those lines, and that's been blocked so far, unfortunately, by the Senate leadership. So there are still some efforts underway in Congress. I know they've, on the House side, they've passed another measure now that would restrict funding for any expansion of the offshore leasing plan, but that's a very temporary kind of thing. So the battle still remains, as we get closer to that June of 2022, and which direction we're going to go on energy and offshore. And of course, the upcoming presidential election will certainly have a big impact on the direction of all that. So we encourage you all to stay engaged and involved. If you could go to the next slide, Scott. And just wrapping up, reminding you all of who we are and the work that we do. Healthy Gulf was founded in Florida, actually, here in the Panhandle at a weekend meeting of some concerned folks all the way back in 1994. And we've been at it ever since. And, the work that Scott does, he would hopefully be able to do more of that if we had more funding to be able to do that. So we'd love for you all to consider being a member if you're not already a member, or at least you can go to our website and sign up for updates. And we promise to keep you up to date on this offshore drilling issue and a variety of other issues that affect the Florida coast and the Gulf of Mexico as well. And so that's healthygulf.org. And if you have specific questions for me and the work that I'm doing and that we're doing on the coast of Alabama and here on the Gulf Coast of Florida, feel free to email me, christian@healthygulf.org. So with that, I think we can take any questions. I know I have a few. I have at least one here in the chat. And so the one that I see so far in the chat, Scott, is, and I don't know that I'll read the whole thing, but it talks about the carbon fee and dividend. It specifically refers to the Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act, which is HR 763, which would impose a slowly rising fee on every barrel of petroleum produced and use the funds collected as a dividend back to citizens. And so the question is whether Healthy Gulf and our membership are we supporting that bill. I don't know if you've been involved in that, Scott, or not.
I have not. Mainly, I do a lot of permitting stuff. What can I say? I think I'm not familiar with it, but for example, we've supported the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act in the past, which takes revenue from the industry and distributes it to coastal states for the purposes of ecological restoration. That's something we have supported, but I can tell you it's so little money compared to what's needed to repair the disasters that do come with oil drilling. And then it's always less than what they promised. I think, I'm much more familiar with Louisiana when Mary Landrieu passed this act, again, having to do with the revenues, and the revenues go back. And this act, it's saying that, normally these revenues are spread throughout the entire country. This act really focused, even brought more money to Louisiana, much more than normal. And first they promised 180 million a year, and then 120, and then 100, and then 80. Like over the years, it just becomes less and less of a number. But it seems like our delegation in Louisiana, it seems like half of their time is spent trying to increase that revenue number. So while we, would support these kinds of market-based solutions to dig and disincentivize oil production, and we might indeed support this act, I don't know. I would say I would be really careful, and we have to watch the numbers, because often these little revenue streams are a few orders of magnitude below what's really needed to restore the Gulf. And so that's why we have to keep keep litigating and keep holding the industry accountable to the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, and that's why the bill like this would not resolve the need to have a moratorium for drilling off of Florida.
Yeah, and I know that we have, declared our support for the Green New Deal, which is sort of a broader set of different policy kind of objectives and things, including a just transition, which is something we've been very big about, and making sure that, those of lower income and lower means and such have equal access to renewable energy and, the opportunity of the new energy that's coming along as we transition our economy. But I'll promise to follow up with Bill specifically on that bill. Bill, I have your email address, and I will follow up with you on that and get a more direct answer for you on that. So, again, if you have a question, type it into the chat. But I've got one I can think of for Scott. So just in the years that you've been going offshore, how's it really elevated your work? I mean, just allowing you to do more and feeling like you're doing more, protective work for the Gulf of Mexico or the communities in these areas?
Oh, well, yeah, it's essential. I mean, a lot of what we do in regards to litigation requires what's called standing. So, I mean, we need to be able to get out there to just see it, because the industry dominates so much of the discussion already about the science of environmental impact. And then if you want to be in federal court, you need to actually go to the Gulf. And, something like pelagic birding trips or week-long sailboating it's not as vigorous as part of an economy as it is in, say, California. So, we try to put on, say, a birding trip ourselves, but we're doing it, without any, we do it just with membership funding. It's just folks like you throwing down, $300 to go on a boat, and that gets us out there to see some of these things. We also spend our own money or try to get donations from different journalistic groups to fund some of these trips. So it really is just the shoestring, it comes out of our general fund without a lot of dedicated funding. But I mean, I think it really, I guess I trained as a scientist, so I just have a need to go see it. I need to go see the things that we're talking about. I'm still trying to get, my glimpse of Brutus whales while they're still there. So I've been talking to all these pilots and the different master naturalist organizations to see if we can't catch a glimpse of these very rare animals south of Pensacola. I think it's very important but it's also important to me just as part of, our history, being born and raised on the Gulf. I just want to see what this land that, my forebears settled and we're so invested in. I really want to experience it. So get with us if you are interested in these kinds of ocean going trips, because we're we have to get people together who are interested in order to get like a tuna boat out to see some of these animals. And I think most of what I do is looking at permits, right? This is like all the sexiest stuff. So again, it's just, it is like kind of terrible and a little bit traumatic to see all this stuff when you go out there. But far and away, most of what you see in the field is just the beauty of the natural environment of the Gulf, and that just that producer of life that it is. It produces so much food for us. And that really keeps me personally going, even though, it's my job to kind of see if we can respond to some of these more horrible things.
What would you like to be able to do more? I mean, if you could get more funding, if we could do more, I mean, what could you see, additional work going offshore being able to bring to our organization and bringing to the communities in those areas?
Well, I don't know if I'm repeating, but just so much of the culture of the Gulf of Mexico assumes it's an industrial site, right? I don't know if that's or this is my sense living in Louisiana. It's just like, what is the Gulf? Oh, it's a working space. It's a factory floor. When really we have one of the Earth's greatest ecological treasures in this ocean. And I think, yeah, the question about working with artists, I mean, yeah, we work a lot with artists to try to just create, it's almost countercultural, right? To envision the Gulf as this place of natural beauty, which it is. So we need to be working with artists and other communicators to bring that to light. When I flew over the Taylor spill with Daryl, the reporter from the Washington Post, I mean, he just, and then this attitude that there's nothing worth looking at out there, I think it does lead some of your more nature-minded folks to shy away and go somewhere else, and maybe go to Monterey Bay in California, or go up to Puget Sound, or hell, Coney Island has whales now, right, in New York. We really need to put in the extra effort to get out there and show the world that the Gulf is not just a factory floor, but even showing people the factory floor, I think, blows people's minds. I think, like, across the country, there's just not this awareness of how industrialized the central and western Gulf is, because it's so far out of sight, and a lot of these impacts are then out of sight, out of mind. But yeah, like, a lot of people don't realize that there's whales in the Gulf, things like that. So what would funding do? Just get out that we have 26 species of cetacean in the Gulf, that we have this endangered Brutus whale, that we have a culture of eating out of the water of the Gulf that defines the Gulf Coast. And we would do that by getting more artists and communicators and naturalists out there.
Yeah. And I'm really glad you brought up the Brutus whale, because I know that, here I am living in Pensacola. I rarely get to go offshore at all, probably like most of us. I never even knew the Brutus whale existed until probably 2 years ago, through my work with Healthy Gulf, which I'm very proud of. As Scott knows, our director, Sin Sartu, really participated, and our organization did heavily in getting the federal government to list that species and deliver the biological opinion. And that status now to protect the Brutus whale is a real roadblock in the plans to drill offshore. And I guess that's one of the great things about living in the system that we do have here in the United States, is it, as imperfect as it can be, there are multiple checks and balances on the system. And so even if they are able to move forward with leasing in the Eastern Gulf of Mexico for drilling, that Brutus whale is really going to be a roadblock to that, because it really looks like any amount of drilling out there would really put that species in serious jeopardy of going extinct. And guess what? That's illegal in America. Our law, the Endangered Species Act, does not allow us to have species go extinct. So I'm really glad you talked about the Brutus whale. And I know I've been following up on when I've heard reports around here of people seeing them and try to find someone who's actually got some photos, but no success with that yet. So I did want to ask you, what, you've talked about some of the ugliness you see out there, of course. What can you share a particularly beautiful or wonderful moment you've experienced out there of nature or beauty?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, just I love the wetlands. I studied the estuary in school. I think for the ocean, I think it's just, I mean, I'm from Louisiana. I'm so used to muddy water, right? I mean, when you learn to scuba dive in New Orleans, you go to Pensacola to get out of the mud. So I'm so used to going out in the water, and yeah, that muddy water has all the fish, and you could see the trout jumping and the black tern swooping on a bait ball. But I think with some of these journalist trips and the pelagic birding trip, you get out into that crystal blue water of the Gulf, and when you get out past the plume of the Mississippi, just the color of the water is mesmerizing. And the gentleness of the Gulf with the color, it's hard. I'm not good enough of a poet or a wordsmith to really think, but just being out there on the ocean and seeing that it's crystal blue doesn't quite describe it. It was like a, oh man, I don't know. It was like a opalescent crystal blue water, and the flying fish, man, fish that fly, right? Just we can't guarantee that you'll see whales if you go offshore off of Pensacola, but we for sure, you will have an experience. The color on the water, things like flying fish, tuna, sea turtles, and the sargassum. I think the Gulf is so full of life that you're going to see animals even after you've long lost the horizon of any land or anything like that. So it's just a very living ocean. I've been out to the Pacific a bit, and it's just not as a lot. It's not full of creatures. When you're on the tuna boat out in this crystal blue water, there's just creatures constantly getting out of your way. The Gulf really is, it's more of a producer. It's part of why we can eat so well in the Gulf. So I just think it's more alive than your average ocean.
Yeah, really, the Gulf is really amazing, even with all the assaults that have been directed at it for so many decades. It's really, the biological productivity is just tremendous with that wetland and that Mississippi marsh. And I know the one time I've flown offshore doing surveying, I've seen that color change, and it really is beautiful when you get out there and you can see things right down in the water. It's really amazing. But I tell you, you gotta have a tough stomach. How's your stomach? Because I know I got as close to getting sick as I got. But you're okay with the flying?
I don't know. Maybe the flying. The flying is fine. I don't know. I'm fine. I would, even the boat tours. I think anyway, my experiences with the Gulf have been, the sea is much more gentle than, say, the Pacific or something.
Yeah, very good. So there was a question about the moratorium in the Eastern Gulf and just whether we get support from other Gulf coastal states. And really, unfortunately, and I can answer this one, the other Gulf states, Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, unfortunately, because they're all invested in the offshore oil and gas industry, they have not been friends to Florida and keeping that industry away from our waters. Once you economically get into that industry, it's really hard to get out of it. And so, our support here in Florida is probably going to come from other states, other than the other 4 Gulf states, unfortunately, but it would be nice if we could get that support, but I'm afraid they're too far into that economy to really pull free from it. So, and let's finish with just one more question. There's a question about the biological productivity and how it's managed to stay so abundant, even with the constant assaults on the Gulf. And I'll let Scott answer that. I think it's more abundant than a lot of places, but it's nothing like it would have been, huh? I would imagine.
Right. That's Louisiana's like that as well. We've got so many swamps and wetlands that we're almost spoiled with it. But the Gulf why is it so productive? Well, we're still learning. That's the thing. I mean, what's incredible is that this BP disaster funded an unprecedented amount of science of the Gulf. And what we found was that the Gulf is one of the most biodiverse oceans on record on the planet. Why that is there's theories. I mean, it's probably because of the different circulation patterns are good. It's gentle. It's not subject to big storms. But these are theories. These are ecological theories that I'm biased. I'm pulling them off of wetlands. Why wetlands are so productive? Because there's always a tidal input and export, and it allows different mixing of nutrients and animals and everything. And the Gulf is similar, where it's a warm, shallow place. It has a tremendous amount of freshwater input, especially from the Mississippi River, that kind of mixes all of the ecological benefits of the land into the ocean, while Florida kind of provides a safe harbor for this little ocean, so it can be kind of just a little cradle of life compared to things like the Atlantic. So I do think that it is a very special place with a lot of unique features, and these probably contribute to its biological productivity. It's warm and gentle, I guess, is like probably the second grade answer to that. But we still have so much to learn about it, and that's why we need to preserve particularly the Florida coast, because it offers us a glimpse of what the whole ocean could be.
Yeah, that the refugia that we have here in the Eastern Gulf, the one place where we don't have the assault of drilling. So, Scott, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. I've always admired your work and considered an honor to be a colleague of yours, and just really enjoy all that you give to our organization and to the people of the Gulf of Mexico. So thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you, all of you, for joining us this evening. We are very much a people and membership focused organization. We couldn't do this without all of you and your interest. So thanks to all of you for asking good questions and for your contributions and for joining us and taking time out of your evening. Continue to engage with us through our website, healthygulf.org. And again, you can sign up for free updates there, and we'll keep you posted on all the issues coming up in the future. So thanks again, everybody. Please stay safe and well, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Take good care.